Well, hello there, guys, and welcome back to Ariel's new DM channel. Um, I have to apologize, hadn't dropped a video again in over a week and a half. Um, I'm hoping that now that I have more time for the holidays, that maybe I can get crank these out with a little bit more regularity. So we'll see. And also, I was kind of brainstorming a topic for me to um to expand upon. And I thought a good I got a good response from my second edition and older edition videos. I know there's a lot of fifth edition material out there, and that's the version of the game or the edition that most people are playing now, including myself. I do play fifth edition every other week, but I have been trying to put together a third edition campaign with some of my friends. It hasn't really gone as smoothly as we planned because of scheduling and things like that. But be that as it may, I thought today what I would talk about is we have done a video, an entire podcast actually, a couple of months back with my friend Chuck. We went over the 3.5 character creation because we were playing a 3.5 game. And why should you even play 3.5? That's a good question. Why should you look into some of the older editions when the mechanics are so different and in some cases are a little bit more crunchy, more complex? There's more math involved. The stats are a little bit wieldy. Well, I would answer that by saying I'm going to answer that in today's video. But primarily, the simple answer to that is they were fun, and for those of us who grew up playing first edition and then tried 3.5 in the early 2000s, I didn't get a chance to really play a lot of 3.5. I sort of went from one and then kind of got a long rest. But be that as it may, I have played 3.5 since, and I we're scheduled to do another 3.5 Zoom campaign at some point. And so I prepared another character, and I thought it would be a good thing to highlight. About a month and a half ago or so, as part of my series on all my favorite supplements of all the editions of Dungeons and Dragons, I went ahead and did a video on the different supplements for 3.5. So we've done that, but I was taking a look back at those, and I realized that I really didn't get into some of the uh, core, or I guess some of the supplements to the core books, like my Races of Eberron, for example. I really love the Eberron campaign. I said that before. It's one original campaign that was made for Dungeons and Dragons 3.5, specifically. And they expanded on it, and they even based the Dungeons and Dragons online video game, which I really do like a lot, the DDO MMO. They based the setting on Eberron. That game was based on Eberron, so that's how I got familiar with Eberron. And on the DDO game, I used to play Warforged. You see here in the background a rendition of a Warforged cleric, and I that's what I decided to play in this upcoming game. And so I thought what I'll do today is sort of go over some of the stats and some of what that character brings to the table, and talk about in the context of character creation, expanding or elaborating on some of the differences or some of the good things I see about the character creation system on 3.5. My friend had me roll a character for him because he's not very familiar with 3.5 at all. And so today, since I have some free time, I'm going to complete his character. Probably not for this video, but off screen, I'll complete his character. But he's gonna try to play a shifter, and the shifters are an interesting race that were elaborated on the Races of Eberron book supplement for 3.5. So sit back and relax, and we'll go over some of the 3.5 character creation, some of the niche, some of the pluses and minuses, if you were. And we'll start with my Warforged cleric character as a running example. All right, guys, here we go with our elaboration or discussion of character creation 3.5 for the character that we're gonna play hopefully pretty soon. maybe this week in the old school D&D campaign. So this character is a Warforged cleric, as I mentioned. I named him. If you're not familiar with Warforged, Warforged are basically a construct. They're kind of like, you can think of them as living. They were created to fight in the last war, and so because they were just a killing machine created to be soldiers, basically. They're constructs. They don't even though they're living constructs, so they're imbued with a life essence, but they don't necessarily need to eat or drink or anything like that. And so I named it D4QP. D4QP. There's a Star Wars reference in there somewhere. If kind of a play. So if you figure out, let me know in the comments. But D4PQ, I'm sorry, D4QP. D4QP is the name. Is a first level cleric warforged. He's of a lawful neutral, and he worships a deity named Saint Cuberth, because the divine power or the power from the clerics comes from a divine source. So they, unlike the wizards, which have to kind of prepare, and it's an arcane form of magic. Uh, the clerics or priests, as we used to call them back in the day, in the old AD&D days, are they derive their power source or their magic from worshiping a specific deity. Now, not all some of the Warforged don't really have a religion, so they just worship kind of like the the essence or the force of good or whatever you want to call it. Star Wars calls it the Force, but it's kind of like a similar idea. So they don't necessarily derive all of them derive their power, but D4QP, this character actually derives. He does worship or is devoted to Saint Cuberth. Saint Cuberth the is his patron saint. Okay, D4QP. He's a cleric, like I mentioned. First, you figure out the role, so it's pretty easy to figure out the stats. You just roll what I use the standard, roll 4d6 and take the lowest number, and then apply your ability scores to the strengths of the character. In this case, I put most of the highest attribute of wisdom, and even though the problem with playing a Warforged is you have some negative stats, negative modifiers to your stats, like you get a -2 in wisdom and a -2 in charisma. So you might kind of say, well, that's not good for the clerics because the clerics derive their power or some of their attributes from charisma, or some of the power from the charisma attribute. But nevertheless, he's still pretty viable. So and you make up with some of those minuses with some of the bonuses that the character gets, and I'm going to briefly go over some of those. He has an HP of 11, which is slightly above average. And the way I arrived at the the hit points is that it's a D8 basically. Plus he gets a Constitution bonus, and so then you're right about initial hit points of 11, and he might actually have more depending on whether he uses some magical feats. Haven't really calculated the feats. Uh, um, let's see what else. The armor class on it is also an 11, and the way you figure it out in 3.5, it's basically a base of 10, which is everybody that has an armor class 10 is average. You're wearing no armor, you have no physical enhancement, but he does get a +2 armor bonus because of the of being a Warforged, because of racial armor bonus. And I should mention at this point that this character doesn't really wear armor. He has most of the, if you have a starting package, see what happens is in 3.5, right off the bat, you roll a character, you get a starting package, and in your starting package is like a simple one for a cleric would probably, if he was a human cleric, he would probably have like a scale mail armor. But like I said, this character doesn't wear any armor, at least not in the traditional sense. And he has a wooden shield, a heavy mace, light crossbow, and then a case with the bolts with some uh, 10 bolts, and of course, if you're a cleric, you now need your holy symbol, and the holy symbol is made of wood, and you also get 4 gold pieces. That's your starting package. But it is a little bit modified for this character because of the fact that I'm not using a human or any other race, but I'm using the Warforged, and therefore the Warforged will give you a completely different modification on the starting, just like modification on some. You can still use some of that starting gear. But the armor class, it's the base 10 plus the 2, which is the racial attribute. There is no shield bonus. It's a wooden shield. It's not like a specific magical shield or anything like that. And there is a dex a penalty of a -1, and that's because the dexterity is not very high for this character. But it's okay. I mean, he's still pretty fast. He has a speed of 30 feet, which is pretty standard. It doesn't get a size modifier, even though he's medium size. And those are all the modifiers there. Now, there was a touch armor class and a flat footed armor class section in 3.5 that is not in the current game. Flat footed basically means like when you start off a combat, you're flat footed, so you don't really get your dexterity bonus that or any bonus that you would necessarily have. Before you take any action in combat. That's all that means. But the flat-footed armor class for this character is 11, and then the initiative hasn't been determined. But basically, I should probably do that next at some point. But basically, you roll a d20, and then you add a dexterity modifier, in which case there is none because of the fact that of the class and any other miscellaneous modifiers that you may add to the character. And then for the saving throws, you get your standard saving throws, reflex, dexterity, and wisdom is your will save. So saving throws in 3.5, if you don't know, you got 42. There's 3 of them. You got 42, you got reflex, and you got your will. And then there is no base attack bonus. 3.5 had also a base attack bonus that when you're making an attack, you get a bonus on top of that, depending on your class. But in this case, there is none. But he does have a spell resistance of 5%, which is different. And then he's able to get a grapple modifier. So the grapple modifier is barely a 1. Because the strength modifier for this character is not that high because I didn't put all strength into it. Even though it's a construct, I figured he'd be tough enough with the constitution and with the other bonuses. So I didn't really give him like a whole lot of strength. I kind of concentrated on wisdom, to be honest, because wisdom is the primary way that clerics operate. If you have a high wisdom, you get bonuses, and this character gets the bonuses. Let's see what else. Then there are the skills, and that's one thing about 3.5 that I kind of miss that is different from 5e. If I'm not mistaken, and you guys can correct me in the comments, if I remember correctly, when you roll up a character in 5th edition, you already have a number of skills that you're proficient with, and it's based on your class. So a fighter obviously will be proficient with like some martial weapons or broadsword or something like that, and then other character classes will be proficient with something else. So they don't really have like a long list of skills per se that you can. I don't even remember there's a skills chapter on the player's handbook for 5e, but there's definitely one whole chapter dedicated to skills in the 3.5 handbook, which yeah, it's chapter 4, if you're curious, starting on page 61 of the Player's Handbook for 3rd edition. And the way that the skills work in 3.5 is you get a depending on your class, you get a specific number of skill points that you can use on a wide range of skills. And you might know that if you play DDO or if you played 3.5 before. But the point I wanted to make is the cleric on first level gets 2 plus an intelligence modifier times 4. That's the formula. So you get two skill points, and then you add the intelligence mod, and then you multiply that by 4, and that'll give you your first level total. So for this character, so if you apply that formula for this character, you would basically have 8 skills to spend on right off the bat, which is good. The downside is that because he's a warforged, um, he is a cleric, but well, not because he was a warforged, but because the way that I rolled the stats, I didn't really emphasize intelligence. He has an average intelligence, which is just fine. I mean, he's a construct. He doesn't need to read scrolls or anything like that. He's not a wizard, so he doesn't need to worry about scrolls or reading spell books. Like I said, remember his magic comes from worshiping the deity or for devoting to the deity, and so he has to have a high wisdom. So I put the wisdom stats as the highest, which is an 18, and then gets a bonus. Um, uh, so yeah. So then the skills, if you use that formula, it's 2 plus the intelligence modifier, which is 0, times 4, which is 8. And so he can choose from a number of skills. And I might put a screenshot of the what skills look like on the character record sheet. But it's basically different than 3.5 because, and that's sort of what kind of intimidates some of the newer players. Or like they look at a character sheet and what is all this stuff? I have to fill out so much more information. And yes, the 5E character sheet was streamlined because of that reason. They streamlined the whole game. But I thought, for my personal test, having giving the player a choice of what skills they take and progressing on those skills as they level up, I think it's a lot more satisfying than the way it is now. But that's just my take on it. Your mileage might vary. But for D4QP, I went ahead and took the concentration, which is a constitution based skill, and I got a modifier out of that, which is good. And I took diplomacy, um, and I took diplomacy that got a negative modifier on that. And that's another thing is you can get negative modifiers on your skills depending on your class. And because the Warforged are not very uh, good at some people they intimidate people, and so it's kind of hard for them to have some diplomacy, but nevertheless it's good to have diplomacy, even if it's not super high. And I took heal, which heal, I don't even know if heal is a skill that's available in fifth edition. I know that they have some medicine skills and they kind of sort of lump a lot of skills into one, which is fine. But the skills on 3.5, I think, are a little bit more detailed, and it tells you exactly what you can do, which I like. I think it's a good mechanic. And then I took knowledge, which gives me, I put a point on knowledge in history and one in religion, because, if you're a cleric, it's always going to come in handy to have knowledge of religion, obviously. And I took listen, spellcraft, and spot for obvious reasons. You're able to spot a trap or to, I sort of followed a little bit sort of the skills that I use when I played DDO, Dungeons and Dragons Online, the video game, because DDO is loosely based, as if you've seen some of my earlier videos, DDO is loosely based on the 3.5 rule set. It doesn't follow it like 100%, I don't think, but it's pretty close. Um, the exciting thing about this character is that if you want to play melee, which I do like playing melee characters, but at the same time you want to have a balance, sort of have some spells at your disposal. That's the great thing about this character. I think that you don't have to multi-class, um, because you're already able to do melee combat, and at the same time you're able to cast some spells, and you have some good spells even at first level because um, uh, the spell system doesn't change all that much in 3.5 to 5.5e, in the sense that you still have a level range of spells that don't necessarily match up with your level as a character. But for example, this character, right off the bat, you can do level 0 spells. And if 5e has the same thing, they call it cantrips. So it's kind of like a trap cantrip. But basically, level 0 is what we refer to it in back in the day, back in the 3.5. And let me just look in the book and check, give you an idea. For example, the 0 level cleric spells that are available to the Warforged cleric. Well, this is available to any cleric, but basically, you create water. Um, you cure minor wounds, you detect magic, you detect poison, you can do guidance, you can inflict minor wounds. So there's a whole range, and you can pick the level 0 spells. And obviously, you don't have to spend a spell slot to cast this. All you have to do is do your concentration and do the however long it takes to cast it. And then at first level, I went with you get to pick one first level spell, and I went with Bane. And Bane basically makes enemies take a -1 on attack rolls and saves against fear. Very useful. And let's see, domain. So in addition to the 0 level spells and the first level spells, you also, because of the fact that he's a Warforged cleric, he also gets one level 2 spell and one level 3 spell. Even though he's level 1, so right off the bat, that's good. I chose Hold Person and bestow curse. So basically, you can put a curse on another on a monster or a another character, another foe, which is really great to have those extra spells. And on top of that, because you're a cleric, you also get your domains. So you get to choose from 2 domains as a word for a cleric. Um, uh, which are this is all clerics basically. You don't have to be warforged, but you get access to 2 domains right off the bat. And I chose the destruction domain and the law. Now, why did I choose law when you have so many domains to choose for? For example, you can have the luck, or you can have a healing domain, or you can have an evil domain. Well, not for this one because it's a cleric, but there's my point is there's a whole bunch of domains. So why choose the law protection domain? It's actually a domain that protects you from chaos. And the reason I chose that is very simple. It's because the domains, um, some of them, or a large part of them, the domain abilities and spells are tied to your deity. So we kind of have to go, or if we get a bonus, or we prefer to use the domains granted to us by our deity. In this case, the protection from law is an abjuration. Chaotic is the alignment. So it protects, especially spells functions like protection from evil, except that the deflection and resistance bonuses apply to attacks from lawful creatures, and lawful summoned creatures cannot touch the subject. So it's pretty good. It's pretty good domain spell. And the other one that I took was uh, protection from chaos was one, and the other one was. We take a quick look at the book again. Inflict light wounds. Is that inflict light wound? Yeah, inflict light wounds. It's a cleric 5 spell, but you can pick it as a domain spell from your for your warforged character, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that, but I think you can. And the final bonus for this character is like any other cleric, is you can turn undead. Um, I don't mean you turn yourself undead. I mean you can turn away undead enemies like zombies and whites. Anything that's undead will be turned. Skeletons that are undead will be turned away from. And if you play cleric, this is standard procedure for a cleric. One of the bonuses is you can turn the undead. But this character also has a couple of special properties or special functions or special attacks. One of them being smite, which means in a melee attack he has a +4 bonus, but you can only do it once daily. But that's huge. That's a huge thing because if you recall, it's not a very strong character. I mean, it can resist a lot because of its constitution and because it's made of it has it doesn't really have an armor, but its armor is a something that they call what's it called? It's there's a special name for it. I forget, but it basically has look it up real quick. It's basically a special kind of armor that is special kind of armor that pertains only to a Warforged class. Here it is. Um, and that, by the way, is why he gets a higher armor bonus than on the AC that he would necessarily get if he was just like a human or something. Here we go. So, what are the attributes? I'll read you the attributes real quick. Um, uh, Unlike other constructs, a Warforged is not immune to mind affecting spells and abilities, which is not good. But however, spells from the healing subschool and supernatural abilities that cure hit point damage or ability damage provide half their normal effects to a Warforged. So you can get hurt that way, but it only does the half effect. Um, a Warforged responds slightly differently from other living creatures when reduced to 0 hit points. So this is important because he's not a human. He can be reduced to 0 hit points, but he doesn't necessarily die. What happens is that he becomes inert, and then inert Warforged, he sort of cannot function. So, but he doesn't lose additional hit points unless more damage is dealt to him. Um, However, as with a living creature, that has become stable. So you can basically um, not suffer from additional attacks and loss of hit points, which is good because he doesn't have a lot of hit points to begin with. So it might be dangerous until you level up. Um, he does have a +2 as a constitution, a +2 bonus on constitution, a -2 on wisdom, and a -2 charisma, like I said before. But composite plating, that's the name of the armor. This plating, composite plating, is unique to the Warforged race, and the plating is used to build a Warforged, which provides a +2 armor bonus. Um, this plating is not natural armor and does not stack with other effects. That's why it doesn't. He doesn't have +2 that the armor bonus gives plus another +3 and then gets a total of +5. No, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't stack up. So it's only what the race gives you. Um, and He's immune to magical aging, and he also has this thing called Slam Attack, which is an attack that you can use in battle as a melee attack, which deals 1d4 damage. It's not a whole lot, but it's better than not having anything to attack. And of course, he's gonna get bonuses with whatever starting. There's a starting package with weapons, and we mentioned it before, like a heavy mace, light crossbow, and a what else? A shield. So he does get some bonuses from the weapons that he carries. So anyway, that's the character, and I'm excited to play him because I've played clerics before, but I never played one as a warforged, let alone one that has such in 3.5 edition that has access to such different skills and a different playing ability, different mechanics. So D4QP will hopefully see some action this week, and I'll report back on his progress. But just wanted to present my character, my 3.5 character, and sort of as a springboard to talk about how 3.5 is a very viable system. It's not too different from 5e. It's a little bit more complex in terms of the mechanics, but you get the hang of it after a while, and I think it's just as fun and just as viable as D&D 5e. And in some respects, I kind of like some of the mechanics better, to be honest, but that's just my personal preference.